Making your own stew is a fabulous way to take advantage of produce that you may have grown in your own garden or that you got at a good sale at the market. It's also a fabulous way to take advantage of meat sales. You can use the same meat that we canned earlier for canned beef. You can use that in your stew. This is the typical or the same chuck roast that I received on sale, but in stew you do a little bit different. One of the fabulous things about stew is you can customize it to your family's taste, and you can also customize it to the quantities of produce that you have on hand. We had just a little bit of stew meat left over, so we went ahead and browned it, and then you can add whatever you prefer. The recipe that I have in the Practical Meals Cookbook calls for potatoes, carrots, green beans, and celery, and onions. So we just had a little bit of each left over, so you dump that in about on top of your meat, and you cover just the top of the stew with hot water. Now that you have your meat browned and you've added your produce, in this one we have potatoes, carrots, green beans, and onions, you cover it with just enough to cover the ingredients with your hot water. You return it to the stove and you bring it to a boil. Before you load your stew into your individual jars, you go ahead and add your salt and pepper. For a full batch of stew, you add 1½ tablespoons of salt and ½ teaspoon of pepper. After you have loaded the main ingredients in your jar, you do add the remaining broth from your pan. It's probably a good idea to remove any air bubbles from the side of your produce. And remember, since we've already added the salt to your stew, you do not need it to add it to individual jars. This is when you take your paper towel and you clean the top of your jar. And you add your flat and your ring, giving it a good snug. Now it's time to seal your jars. You process pints at 10 pounds of pressure for 1 hour. You process quarts at 10 pounds of pressure for 1 hour and 15 minutes. Remember, before you put the jars in the canner, you need to have a rack as a barrier between the bottom of the jar and the canner, and you need to add 2 quarts of water to your canner. This is a fully cooked and sealed jar of stew. You do not hear the popping noise, so that indicates that the jar is fully sealed. If it would make the popping noise. So make sure after your jars have cooled, you will hear the pop, and then you can test to see if your jars have successfully sealed.